All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. We have made it to the end of our player rankings journey today. We are hitting number one, Nikola Jokic. And then I've got a mailbag for the tail end of the show. Next week, we'll have two follow-up videos to the player rankings list. I have the Nerd Sesh guys coming on Monday. We're going to argue about our top 10. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a video that's more of like a bragging rights focus. So kind of similar to last year's criteria where we're just looking at who had the best season in terms of bragging rights. Not going to do a top 25. We're just going to focus on like the top 5 or so, but we'll do that next week. And then we're turning our attention forward to next season, but we're going to tie up our player rankings today. Hope you guys enjoyed the launch of the NFL season last night. Obviously a super entertaining game. I am always blown away every year at the start of the NFL season by just how like culturally resonant it is here in the United States. Like, I'm as big a basketball fan as you'll find, obviously. I mean, I've given my entire life to the game, but I don't see anything in the game of basketball that like really engages the community the way that the NFL does. And like, I'm with a bunch of friends and family last night, and on that crazy last Baltimore drive, just the energy that's in that room. Like, when I go over and see my friends and family and I'm watching an NBA playoff game or something like that, let's just say it doesn't engage the entire room the way that the NFL can. And it's funny because like, it's fascinating from a business standpoint because the NBA in terms of revenue is closer to the NFL than you would think, given that gap in cultural resonance. But like, I was just blown away last night. Like, the NFL is just an entirely different animal with the way that it engages people. But for all of you psychopaths out there that are turning down the NFL content today to watch me talk about Nikola Jokic, I appreciate you guys for rocking with me. You guys know the drill before we get started. Subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at @JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget it's helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. And last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments so we can keep hitting them over the course of the rest of this summer. So Nikola Jokic, last year, 79 games played. He's played in at least 72 games in 8 of his 9 NBA seasons. The only time he didn't was 2 years ago when they won the title, and he played 69 games in that year. So he's one of the most available stars in the league. He was the MVP of the league last year. He's won 3 out of the last 4. The last guy to do that was LeBron James, who won 4 out of 5. So obviously Jokic has a chance to match that run this year. But in terms of guys to win 3 MVPs in 4 seasons, before LeBron was Magic Johnson, before Magic Johnson was Larry Bird, before Larry Bird was Kareem, before Kareem was Wilt, and before Wilt was Bill Russell. So that's LeBron, Magic, Larry, Kareem, Wilt, and Russell. That's really rare company. That's some damn good company for Nikola Jokic to be in terms of MVP production. I had a lot of over the course of this Jokic stretch that he's been on, one of the takes that I've had is that I think this is the most dominant individual stretch, like the highest ceiling individual stretch since LeBron James. And I had a lot of Steph Curry fans in particular get very upset at me for saying that. And like, I want to just remind people, like, what we're seeing from Jokic is exceedingly rare. Like I said, like the 2 guys to do it since Magic are LeBron and Nikola Jokic in terms of 3 MVPs in 4 seasons. He finished second in the year that he didn't win it, and he won the title that year. And so, like, I want to, like, just shine a little bit of a light on the fact that, like, even though we're in the mix of this here, and there's a lot of really good players in the league, and as we're going to discuss today, I think Jokic has slipped back to the pack a little bit in the last season because of some issues that he had on defense and with his jump shot. But what we're seeing in terms of just sheer basketball accomplishment right now is pretty rare. And I hope that doesn't just slide under the radar when we're looking back at Jokic. It's not usual to see a guy rack up the accolades that we've seen Nikola rack up over the last few years. His counting stats from last year: 26 points per game, 12 rebounds per game, 9 assists per game, 2.3 steals plus blocks per game. His shooting splits, I'm going to rip through these numbers as quick as I can, and then I want to get into some of the minutia of what makes Nikola Jokic so dominant. But shot 58% in field goals, 36% from 3, 82% from the foul line, 61% in effective field goal percentage when you weight his field goal percentage for threes, and then 65% in true shooting percentage when you add free throws to that equation. Shooting stats per synergy, he got 1.01 points per jump shot, considerably down from last year, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. 1.05 points per catch and shoot, 0.83 off the dribble, 0.81 in face-up situations. So not a very good jump shooting season from Jokic relative to what you expect. 63% on floaters and 60% on hooks, 389 total attempts on hooks and floaters. That's the most dependable single possession scorer in the league right there in Nikola Jokic. We're going to get into more detail on that in a little bit. Shot 70% at the rim. Also got 4.2 makes in the restricted area per game. That was the 16th most in the entire NBA. His play type data per synergy, he ran 220 inverted ball screens where he was the ball handler in a pick and roll. Got 1.09 points per possession. That is 86th percentile, including passes. ISO, 158 possessions for 166 points. That's 1.05 points per possession, which is the 74th percentile. And then Jokic is the best post-up player in the league by any metric. He ran 829 post-ups last year. Second place was Anthony Davis at 443. So just an entirely different stratosphere in terms of volume. He also got 1.15 points per possession, which including passes, which is first among the 18 players in the NBA to log at least 250 reps. And LeBron was in second place at 1.11 points per possession. So a full 4 points per 100 possessions above the rest of the field in efficiency. As we mentioned, his volume is off the charts. He generated 76 made threes for his teammates out of post-ups. That was 35 more than anyone else on the list. He's just the best at it. But at the same time, when we're talking play type data with Jokic, we got to remember he can really score within the flow of the offense. He got 1.28 points per roll man possession. That ranked second out of the 12 players to log at least 200 roll man possessions. He personally shot 62% on the roll, so just incredibly deadly when he catches there in the pocket looking to finish. He scored 120 times on cuts. He scored 92 times on offensive rebound putbacks. That was the fourth most in the entire NBA. So that's really a main differentiator for Jokic. He can play with real ball and player movement. Like, he can score in the flow of an equal opportunity offense, which opens up opportunities for his other players to be confident looking to make plays. That's what you'll see Aaron Gordon take possessions on. You'll see Michael Porter Jr. and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope look to do things with the ball in their hands. Obviously, we know what Jamal Murray can do. It's an equal opportunity offense, even though Jokic is the fulcrum of it. You know, when it comes to baskets that he makes out of like straight up on the ball post-ups and ISOs, it's a small percentage of the amount of baskets he actually makes. And that's one of the things that I think is a ceiling raiser for a team. When you can say that a player is going to score and score efficiently and can score as a singular force, but also can be plugged into a system where everybody is confident and involved in the offense, I think there's real value there. And that is, for the record, one of the four main reasons I have Jokic over Luka, but we're going to get to that later. So now that we've ripped through the numbers, let's get into some of the breakdown of the specific reasons why Jokic is the best player in the league. So it starts with looking at the offensive end of the floor in the big picture sense that I think Jokic, among all the offensive engine archetypes, and like these are guys that are like kind of an offense in and of themselves. And everybody is this to a certain extent, but the really good ones that we think of are guys like Jokic, guys like Luka Doncic. I think Steph Curry's kind of an engine unto himself. LeBron James is kind of like that. Tyrese Halliburton is kind of like that, where it's almost like the player has like this unique play style that they inflict on a roster, and they just seem to generate high-level offense consistently, right? Like that's kind of the identity of what we call an offensive engine. Now, lesser players still do that. Giannis is still an offensive engine, and Anthony Edwards is still an offensive engine. These guys are all still like that. They're just lesser versions of that. But that among that archetype, I think Jokic is the best in the entire league. And it starts because of the fact that he can do it both ways, starting as a devastating 5-out fulcrum. So, you know, we're going to do a lot more as we head into the season previews, and as we head into the season, we're going to go back to doing more video. And we're going to go back to doing more like when I show you guys the actual like X's and O's chart that we work with. But I did a breakdown earlier this summer when we were talking about Isaiah Hartenstein, where I went over the general concept of 5-out, right? And in 5-out, you're always working from side to side on the floor, and you're running multiple actions in the same possession. And the center position is the fulcrum. And the reason why they are the fulcrum, they are the guy that is dribbling at the one side of the floor to get the dribble handoff to the guy that's either coming off of a pin down or just coming out of the corner by himself, and he is setting a screen. But as he sets that screen, he is turning into the middle of the floor and making himself available on the catch. And in many cases, he will catch there and have to make the next play in terms of like shooting on the roll if it's a floater, or drawing that extra defender for a kick out pass to a three. But in the event that the play doesn't amount to anything, the ball has to be reversed. And so if that's a drop off to Jokic that doesn't amount to anything, that he has to turn and look to the other end of the floor, or if the guard throws a swing pass, if the guard swings it to the other end of the floor, that roll man, the guy who set the screen on the first side, has to sprint over to the other side and set another screen for another player coming off of another dribble handoff. That player there, that big man, the 5-man in 5 out, is critically important for greasing the wheels as the ball moves to both ends of the floor. It extends beyond that to making passes against overplays. So one of the most common plays you'll see defensively is you'll see a big guy dribble over to the wing to go do a dribble handoff for a 5-out action, but it'll be a really good shooter or scorer coming out of the corner, and so his defender will top block him, meaning he will slide up to his top side and literally deny him the use of the screen. Like if the screen is where the camera is, the defender is going to position himself right here, which makes it so that he can't go that way, so he has to back cut. And it's very important for the big man who's dribbling to that side of the floor, to be capable of making those reads and making those passes to guys cutting back door or slipping out of screening actions. You'll see the same thing where like you'll run like a Chicago action, which is where you have a guy screen down for the corner as he comes off into where the big man is, right? So it's like a pin down into a dribble handoff. In that situation, you have two guards in the action. If they botch the switch in some way, shape, or form, you have an opportunity to slip there into an opening. If that happens, you need your big man to be paying attention and to be able to make those reads. And so like when it comes to modern NBA offense, and the majority of teams now are starting to kind of tilt towards this kind of 5-out approach, you need to have a center that can grease the wheels and make all of that stuff work. Jokic is devastating in that sense. He's a very, very good screener, meaning when guys are chasing over the top, they have a hard time staying attached. That's a big part of what allows Jamal Murray to get going. He can pass and score on the roll. So if he sets that screen and Jamal comes off, or KCP comes off, or whoever it is comes off, and he catches in the middle of the floor, he's absolutely deadly with that floater at that 10-foot range. I mean, he makes them over 60% of the time. And if you show on him and come up to him on the catch, he can make all of the passing reads out of that as well, if not better than anybody else in the league. Hitting the cutters piece as well or better than anyone else in the league in terms of dribbling at an action and seeing somebody slip out of it. He's going to make that pass. Even in the event that you get a shot up and it misses, he's one of the most effective offensive rebound scorers in the league. He is the 4th most offensive rebound putbacks in the entire NBA last year. So like he's an efficient, high volume scorer who doesn't need to dominate the basketball. Everything is in the flow. That frees up his teammates to go make plays. It empowers them, which is a ceiling raiser for a team. But at the same time, when it's go time, and you can't rely on a KCP, or you can't rely even on a Jamal Murray potentially, you can spam heliocentric stuff with Jokic to generate offense. So when the shit's not working and you can't just go down the floor and run a series of dribble handoffs to get a wide open cut or a wide open three, and you need to try to make something out of nothing, you can throw the ball down to the block and just spam Jokic post-ups. And if you leave him on an island, he's going to make a hook shot at 60%. And if you double team, he's as good or better than everybody else in the league at making the spray out passes to shooters from there. And then with two-man game with Jamal Murray, which is a more heliocentric kind of action where they just space the floor and it's just Jokic and Murray just like repeatedly setting dribble handoffs and ball screens until they get somebody open, that's an action they can spam and be one of the most devastating clutch time scoring duos in the league. And so like that to me is the main differentiator between Jokic and a lot of like the more heliocentric guys in the league, is he can play that way, but he also can play like an equal opportunity 5-out kind of sense. And even when you zoom in, and I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about hooks and floaters, I think Jokic is the most efficient single possession scorer in the league, right? So in the large sample, it's all about points per possession, right? So like, for instance, if you take a lot of step back threes like a Luka Doncic or in general like a Steph Curry, You, in a massive sample over the course of the season, you might get 1.15 points per possession in a play type, which is really good, right? But then when you zoom in on the singular possession, a step back three is not going in 60% of the time. It's going in, like I think Luka shot 38% on him last year. So that means if Luka goes to a step back three, he's actually only scoring a little over a third of the time. And so when things really slow down, it becomes about one possession or two possessions or three possessions. Jokic is actually a more reliable scorer in those situations. Here's a simple stat to break that down. If you factor in made field goals, but also the foul rate, like getting to the foul line, it gives you something called score percentage, the percentage of your possessions that you actually score on. Luka Doncic last year generated points for his team on 46.9% of his ISOs, including passes. He generated a score for his team on 49.8% of his post-ups, including passes. For Jokic, it was 51% in ISOs and 53% in post-ups. And so in those situations where it's Jokic on an island, one-on-one, he is generating points for his team more than half the time. Whereas for Luka, it's less than half the time. Slightly so in both directions, but that makes a big difference when you need a bucket at the end of the game. Jokic is going to get close to the rim into the short range, and he's going to get a shot that he's going to hit about 60% of the time. That is a real tool to have in your bag. Call a timeout, down by 4, there's 40 seconds left. We need bucket, stop, bucket. You come out of the timeout, you drop an action for Jokic, and you feel damn good about the fact that it might go in. Whereas, like, if you're drawing up a play for, let's say, Steph Curry, for instance, and it's like we're going to have him run off of this action. He's going to get like a elevator screen on the opposite side of the floor after running some decoy action on the primary side, and he's going to get a good look. It's like, this is going to be a good look for us. It's like he might make it 42% of the time, right? So that means there's a 58% chance on that possession that he's going to miss. And so that short-range scoring piece adds a layer of like reliability to Jokic's scoring that is super valuable, especially when you get into winning time in high leverage moments in the postseason. So he checks the versatility box in a major way on the offensive end. Even from a team building perspective, like your ability to put him next to a non-shooting four like Aaron Gordon, because he's such a good passer that you can weaponize Aaron Gordon as a vertical spacer around the rim. That's a luxury that most teams can't pull off. And that's a credit to what Jokic does for a basketball team. Now, let's talk about his weaknesses for a second. Now, and before you get upset, Jokic fans, we've done this for every single player on this list. There has not been a single player that we didn't discuss weak points and areas for improvement. I think Jokic is the clear number one in the league, but I think the gap is smaller than it was last year. After the title last year, I thought Jokic was far and away the best player in the league. I thought there was like a sizable gap between him and number two. I think he's fallen back to the pack a little bit in this last season, and it really came down to two major areas of slippage. He wasn't as good defensively as he was in the championship year, and he went from a great jump shooter to being a mediocre jump shooter in the regular season and a bad jump shooter in the playoffs. So let's get into each of these individually for a minute. First, the defensive end of the floor. Two main areas where he struggled last year, especially in the postseason. He got absolutely fried one-on-one in his individual defense by Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis ISO'd or posted up Nikola Jokic one-on-one 9 times in the first round and scored on him 7 times. By the end of the series, it was crazy. Denver was like heavily shading all AD post-ups, like straight up leaving dudes open to double team. And then at certain points in the series, they actually pulled Jokic off of AD entirely and put Aaron Gordon on him. And like, that's the same matchup in 2023 that Jokic won. He was getting all sorts of stops on AD and ISO to the point where the Lakers just stopped throwing the ball to Anthony Davis. So like, that was an area of regression. The second piece was rim protection. And it's a simple stat I want to show you guys. In 2023, the Denver Nuggets allowed just 15 makes per game within 5 feet of the rim in the postseason on just 62% shooting. That went up to 20 makes per game on 65% shooting in this year's playoffs. So that's a substantial increase in the effectiveness of opponents attacking the rim against Denver's defense. Jokic just didn't offer very much resistance against LeBron and AD, and then again against Anthony Edwards in the second round. And I think fatigue played a role. Jokic looks tired in general and especially so in that Minnesota series. There were some really ugly possessions at the end of Game 7 where he just let guys dribble around him, or he gave up on defensive rebound situations where guys crashed past him to get the ball. I did a whole film session on this after Game 7, so you can see video evidence of this if you just scroll back into our YouTube feed, go right after Game 7 last year. But here's the thing. Jokic had turned himself into a good defensive player. He was active with his hands at the high of when he would come up high in ball screens and he'd get deflections. He was a very good communicator, a dominant defensive rebounder, but he just regressed last year. He let go of the rope a little bit. He just needs to refocus on that end of the floor. And for the record, I didn't think he was anywhere near as bad as Luka was in his playoff run. So there's levels to this. Jokic has declined to being like an average defensive player. To me, Luka is still firmly in that below average to even sometimes bad category on the defensive end of the floor. The second piece of his decline was jump shooting. And this was something, those of you guys who followed the show, I was on this all year last year. I kept saying, Jokic's jumper doesn't look the same. This could be an issue. And it was. In 2023, here's some basic numbers. 2023, a Jokic jump shot in the regular season was worth 1.17 points per shot. In the playoffs, it went up to 1.21 points per shot. Just a dominant, great jump shooter all season long, all the way to when he hoisted the trophy. Last year, in the regular season, 1.01 points per jump shot. So 16 points per 100 jump shots worse. And I was calling that out all year. And then it ended up being even worse in the postseason. He got 0.87 points per jump shot, guys. That is literally 34 points per 100 jump shots worse than he was in the previous postseason. He was just 8 for 35 from 3 against Minnesota. That's just 23%. He shot just 6 for 18 on unguarded jump shots in the playoffs. And the main problem is Minnesota was packing the paint, being super physical, and Jokic was getting some good looks from the perimeter. It was what he needed to beat the coverage. There was a whole part of Jokic's game in 2023 when they won the title that had to do with him picking and popping and knocking down shots and then driving closeouts as dudes tried to chase him off that line. That part of his game was gone last year. Teams were just closing out short to him because he wasn't making them. Here are a couple of basic stats to demonstrate that. In 2023, in the postseason, Jokic got 1.26 points per roll man possession and 1.16 points per spot up possession. Last year in the postseason, 1.07 points per roll man possession, so 19 points per 100 possession worse. And then 1.00 points per spot up possession, which is 16 points per 100 possessions worse. So massive declines there. Wasn't hitting those pick and pop threes, so he wasn't driving the closeout, drawing the closeout so that he could drive it. It's a ceiling raiser for him. He's still the best player in the league without that jump shot because he's a center and he can do most of his scoring in the short to mid-range, and he doesn't have to pop. He can pick and roll and be a devastating scorer. And one of the things that Jokic very rarely does is spot up. With the exception of the occasional Jamal Murray post-up, Jokic isn't spotting up. And even in those cases, he usually positions himself closer to the rim to be more of an offensive rebounder. But the jump shot can help him in 3 huge ways. 1, it opens up his pick and pop game where he can start driving closeouts like we talked about. 2, it allows him rest in the game. Those possessions where you pop to the three-point line and take a three take very little energy, and they're a way to supplement your offense without having to work as hard. And then the third piece of it is rescue possessions. You guys remember in the title run, a huge part of Jokic's game was hitting those crazy somber shuffle shots at the end of the clock, or just jab step jumpers in the mid-range at the end of game at the end of shot clocks. That was a huge offensive boost for the Nuggets last year. And so again, I still think he's the best player in the world, but that decline as a defender and as a shooter have made it from being a gap to being something much smaller in that department. But I do want to explain why I have Jokic over Luka. So here are the 4 reasons why I have Nikola Jokic over Luka Doncic right now. First of all, Jokic is more durable. He averages 75 games played in his career, and he's generally been healthy in the playoffs. Luka, 67 games played per year, and he's been banged up in the postseason before. So you can basically book him to miss twice as many regular season games as Jokic, and it's less consistent for him to be at his top level when he gets there. Secondly, Jokic is a far more versatile offensive player. As a GM, I have a lot more options offensively with what I can do around Jokic because he empowers ball and player movement. Like we talked about earlier, getting a guy like Aaron Gordon, to fit into your offense. That's something that would be an issue. Imagine PJ Washington plays that role for Dallas, but he's a guy that can knock down corner threes at a high percentage, and he even shot like mid 30s on above the break threes in the regular season before he kind of fell apart in the Boston series, right? But like he's a guy who's like at least a average type of shooter. Aaron Gordon, with exception of the right corner, was a bad shooter last year. Like he's not a guy that teams are going to guard at all at the 3-point line. That would be an issue for a Dallas offense in a way it wouldn't be in an offense for Denver, because there's ball and player movement, and Jokic empowers Aaron Gordon as a baseline cutter in a way that wouldn't work alongside a Derek Lively or a Daniel Gafford. There's more flexibility in the way you can build around him. But at the same time, if I need to just force feed Jokic the ball and have him just be devastating in a singular context, I can do that with Jokic to a similar level of impact to what I can get from Luka. Number 3, he's a more reliable single possession scorer. I also think he's a better offensive engine in the large sample, which is a big part of why Denver's offense has outperformed Dallas's offense every year. But also when you need a big moment, a big basket in a big moment, Jokic has these super reliable short range scoring moves that he can hit about 60% of the time. And that just takes away variance. There's more jump shooting variance with Luka in those situations because he's generally going to take a step back jump shot of some kind, whether it's from the mid range or from the 3-point line. And then lastly, at number 4, he's a much easier defensive player to build around. Jokic can struggle to protect the rim, but he's a very useful high drop big because he's active with his hands and he's a good communicator. And he's also a dominant defensive rebounder. Luka can't do much on defense. He's too slow-footed to hedge, so I pretty much have to switch with him. So I basically have to hide him off the ball and hope the other team doesn't choose to attack him. He is a useful off-ball defender, but not nearly as much as Jokic is. So to put it simply, as I mentioned earlier, Jokic is roughly an average defender even after his decline, which is perfectly respectable, and I can build around that, whereas Luka is still like in that below average to bad category for me outside of specific circumstances, which is not what you're going to need when you face 4 different teams in the playoffs, right? So that's our list. We have a couple of follow-up things we're going to do early next week, like I talked about, but I'm excited to move on for player rankings and start talking about teams again. I always enjoy this list, but it always gets a little contentious and a little nasty, which is unfortunate, but it's just kind of the nature of the way these lists work. But I do put in an enormous amount of work for these, and so those of you guys who have supported along and watched along the way, I sincerely appreciate it. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Fans have spoken. We want to bet on touchdowns. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. The first game of the season is coming up on Thursday. Kansas City is currently favored by 3. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer ends September 19th, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's get into our mailbag. I think offense is more important than defense, but as a community, I think NBA fans greatly undervalue the defensive side of the ball. So this is an interesting kind of comment because I think it calls attention to trying to differentiate between what we're talking about when we're talking about defense. So within the team context, defense and offense share equal value. Because it's simple. Like if I stop you from scoring 2 points, it carries the same amount of impact as if I score 2 points, right? In terms of the change on the scoreboard, right? So like defensive value is literally statistically equal. I would even argue that within the team context, when you get to the postseason, that defensive value actually ticks up a little bit more than offensive value because the game gets more physical and so many of those games degrade down into rock fights and it becomes more about size and strength and winning physical battles. And generally speaking, teams that are elite on the defensive end have some more like sustainability in those environments than offenses do. Offenses can crumble sometimes under physicality, whereas defenses tend to thrive in those settings. However, that's all within the team context. Within the individual context, I still strongly believe that it is easier to build a good defense around a limited defensive star than it is to build a good offense around a limited offensive star. Simply because the superpower of offense is impossible to coach and scheme for. Whereas the superpower of defense, you can throw together as a coach a scheme, and as a GM, you can supplement your star with certain archetypes of players and construct something that works defensively. It's just my kind of basketball worldview, if that makes sense. Having now gone through the entire list, how do you feel about the new criteria and the system for ranking these players you used this year? Thanks a ton for making these. I appreciated every minute of the series, even when I disagreed. Keep up the good work. Thank you for supporting the show. I sincerely appreciate it. This has been an interesting year in the sense that like everyone was really upset with me for the way I did things in the past in terms of the bragging rights. And so I came up with this system as a way to try to be like more realistic and hopefully kind of find more common ground with people, and everyone just got pissed off for different reasons. And so part of it is like, it's interesting because like I love this list. I do. And I do it every year and I'm never going to stop doing it. At least I don't think I'm going to stop doing it. But like at the same time, like it's always the time that it gets nastiest, and that part always sucks. But one of the things that I've gotten better at understanding is like there's a certain amount of negativity that's going to come out no matter what. Like no matter what I do, there's going to be negativity. Like I even see when I praise players, I'll see comments from people saying I didn't praise them enough for what they do. And so like at a certain point, you just kind of got to accept that it's a losing battle. And so I'm getting a little better at that. But in terms of like learning a lesson, I'm sure I'll make slight tweaks here and there, but I do think I prefer this format to the format of doing bragging rights. And like if I were to tweak it again, like if I were to just do like straight up just like who's the best basketball player right now, everyone's healthy, I think that could open up a whole other can of worms, because then I'm going to have a bunch of older guys up at the top. Like I would have probably had LeBron at number 3 if that was the case. And if I had LeBron at number 3, I'm going to get roasted for that. So like it's just at the end of the day, you can't win with the internet. You know how that goes. So I think this kind of general format makes the most sense to me. Like, who would I rather have from October to June for this coming season? That's a way of ranking players in a way that seems kind of like practical to what an NBA season actually looks like. And so I did enjoy that part, even though I felt like I was constantly having to try to explain it. And I still feel like some people didn't really understand what the criteria was. And so at a certain point, you just kind of have to accept that there's no perfect system. Can you please make a power ranking list of the teams and how teams are positioned heading into the 2024-2025 season? So another thing that I do every year is I do power rankings before the season in the format of season previews. So what we're going to do is I'll do at least 10, and then I'll probably do some bonuses. So I'll probably do like top 10 teams in the league, and then I'll hit a couple of teams that are outside of the top 10 that have more significant fan bases that we can hit. But every year, I do a full season preview where I talk about like changes that the roster made, different, depth chart things that we'll look at. We'll look at what kind of offense they run, what kind of defense they run, and just kind of preview what I expect from them that season, whether or not they're positioned for a trade, if they do need to make a trade. We do full season previews just within the context of a power rankings format, and we'll work our way from 10 to 1 and go from there. That's going to start a week from this coming Monday. And so just keep an eye on the feeds and you'll start to see some of that stuff. Hey, Jason, I really hope my comment gets through. You're one of my favorite basketball pundits due to your unbiased, logical way of thinking the game. I just noticed, though, I greatly disagree with Ja's position. I think he's likely to have a greater season than Ant just had due to the trajectory he was on prior to his suspension. His first step, rim attacking, and his ability to guard at an average to good level to me, placed him closer to 11 to 13. So I agree with you in terms of like if Ja had not just missed an entire season, he probably ends up in that 11 to 13 range. He's in that top 12 for me, the top 12 guys after Jimmy and Kawhi. That 11 guys that I used in that like top 2 tiers, I would have grown that to 2 and included Ja if he was healthy last year. I just had him back because he's had health issues and off-court issues that have kept him away from his team. I can't remember the exact stat, but he's missed like 80% of his team's last 100-something games. So like he just hasn't been around enough. But I do agree that he would be in that 11 to 13 range had he availability not been an issue. Don't necessarily agree about him being an average to good defender. I think he's more below average to average defensively, but it's mainly just because he's really, really skinny and small. He can make like defensive plays in transition and stuff like that, but he's still can struggle in terms of like actually filling a really consistent defensive role. Great show. Always try to listen in and always enjoy it. Off-season question. Can you put together a lineup with to win the title without taking the best player from any team? This was a fun one, right? So again, you're building a roster, can't pick a single player that is the best player on their team. So the one that gets a little tricky here, because of all of the power rankings guys or the player rankings guys where I had 2 on the same team, like Tatum's clearly better than Jaylen Brown, Giannis is clearly better than Dame. But with the AD LeBron one, it's tricky because like if everyone's healthy and we're playing tomorrow, I think LeBron's the best player. But like AD, I think at age 30 is just like a more reliable, October to June kind of guy. So for this case, I'm either getting AD or LeBron. I decided to just call LeBron the best player on the team. So AD automatically becomes my center at that point. So I've got AD at center. Dame is your obvious point guard because he's the second best player on his team with Giannis. Jaylen Brown is your 3. So I've got a 5 AD, I've got Dame as a 1, I've got Jaylen Brown as a 3. So I need a power forward and a shooting guard. I was looking at a couple of different options. At power forward, the 2 main guys I was looking at were Bam Adebayo and then a guy like Chet Holmgren. And his shooting next to AD is interesting, but he's really young and a little thin. So I kind of lean towards Bam there. And then at shooting guard, I'm looking at guys like Kyrie Irving, who's second behind Luka, Jamal Murray, who's second behind Jokic, and Devin Booker, who's second behind KD. I think I lean towards Devin Booker there. And so if I was building a roster, or starting 5, I should say, with a team made of entirely players that are not the best player on their team, I'd have Dame at the 1, Devin Booker at the 2, Jaylen Brown at the 3, Bam at the 4, and AD at the 5. I feel like I'm definitely winning the title with that 5. Like Jaylen Brown is now my primary point of attack defender, which is where I'd like Book. Like I think Devin Booker can be a useful point of attack defender, but I'd prefer him guarding the second best perimeter player, which is a nice way to slot him there. I've got tons of length behind Dame. Obviously, Dame brings defensive issues, but if I've got Bam Adebayo and Anthony Davis on the back line, that makes things easier. I probably can run a switching look as long as I kind of load up things behind Dame when he switches. And then I really like the idea of Bam and AD playing together, not based just solely off of what we saw at the Olympics, but you can kind of think of them playing like the Warriors, like 2 non-shooting bigs going side to side as 5-out fulcrums. But I've got Dame and Devin Booker coming off as these like awesome pull-up shooters, and Jaylen Brown who can come off and look to score and get downhill and get to the rim. I think that's a damn good lineup entirely out of players that are not the best player on their team. Last question. The fact is that Luka's production has gone up every season. So how can you claim the skinnier, quicker version was better when the stats and the results have shown otherwise? Never said the skinnier and quicker version was better. I just said he was skinnier and quicker. He's clearly gotten better. He's the second best player in the league now, which is the first time I've felt that. This is all about potential. He's the second best player in the league because from age 19 to age 25, he's gotten better at basketball. He's solved the NBA. He's improved in some specific skill areas, but he's done that while trending down in terms of his foot speed and his conditioning. And so again, like there's some benefit from it. He's become bigger and stronger, which has helped him with some of the physical battles. But if you replace, I saw someone in the comments say like if he dropped 20 pounds of body fat and replaced it with 10 pounds of functional muscle, like how far that would go to improving him as a player. And I sincerely believe that. I think that in overall, like would he not be able to bully as many matchups? Probably, but the increase in terms of his conditioning, in terms of his ability to stay effective late in games, which he struggled with last year in the postseason, and his ability to be just, again, I saw another comment. I actually screenshotted today. It was funny. This person said, I can't believe what I'm seeing in these comments. In the last 3 seasons, Luka has led the Mavs in every offensive category, had team success, and sent home Booker, Shea, Anthony Edwards, Kawhi, Harden, PG, and Mitchell in the playoffs. You want this man to play all NBA defense as well? Yes. That's the conversations you're putting him in. You're putting him in conversations as like best player in the world or like all-time great trajectory. Like the guys who are all-time greats, they all play defense at a certain level. You know, I'm not expecting him to be like all world, but like he should at least be competing on that end of the floor to a higher level than he has been. You know what? Like what you're discussing, the guy who led his team in points, rebound, assists, sent all these stars home and is the primary offensive engine, blah, blah, blah. That's literally what LeBron James did for the entirety of his prime. Like he took some regular season games off defensively towards the tail end in Cleveland, but for the most part, in that 2010 to 2020 stretch when he was running the league, he was defending. That was a big part of his identity. And again, I'm not asking for Luka to literally make an all-defense team, but is it too much to ask for him to devote resources and compete on that end? I don't think so. It's what his peers have done in NBA history. Steph Curry, without anywhere near the physical tools as some of his all-time great peers, has become an average to above average defensive player because he competes on that end of the floor. We talked about it with Jokic earlier. Like that's all. Like there's no doubt that Luka is better now than he's ever been, but there's also no doubt that he's leaving some meat on the bone. And I think that that's fair criticism to send in that direction. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. I hope you enjoy the weekend. We'll be back on Monday with the Nerd Sesh guys to get further into the top 10 debate. I'll see you guys then.